Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out.
I have with me today Matt Bilinsky, an incredible human, inquisitive, really amazing guy, smart, bright, and many accolades after his name. But I'm grateful to have this conversation. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well, Doctor. You're too kind.
Oh man, you're crushing it. And I just love, I think what really makes people cool is when they have lots of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And you are right up there, man. I just strive every day to be as curious as Matt Bilinsky. So tell us how you got there, a little bit about you.
No doubt. I'm first and foremost, my day job, I'm an attorney, not even a litigator. I'm a business attorney. I work with a lot of startups and a lot of talent and brands and things of that nature. But naturally inquisitive, probably was like a failed journalist in another lifetime, or successful journalist and failed journalist in this lifetime. But then the internet comes around and the opportunity to almost be your own reporter, journalist arises. And over the years, I've had a pretty active social media, and I definitely like pursuing a little bit beyond the story, particularly in the digital media age when everyone's very surface. And all these news organizations are pushing out a lot of content, but not a lot of good content. And we've really sacrificed a lot of quality for quantity. And definitely, I'd say since around 2015, 2016, I have been incredibly skeptical of the stories that we are getting from more traditional legacy news organizations. And that can be informed by other, when the time is right, other non-media institutions like health institutions and some of the, let's call it the orthodoxies of these institutions that are then peddled by the media. And I've always been pretty skeptical. And that skepticism has grown. And I've really been a bit of a bloodhound the last 5-6 years, investigating where I think these institutions that we have put our trust in, that may at one time have been very legitimate and credible, are really, if not outright lying to us, not telling us the entire story, or being pretty manipulative. And so I started calling out a lot of that on my social media, for a few years, 15, 16, 17. And, some people that hadn't really woken up to the degrading of these news organizations people trusted, regardless of the political affiliation. Your dad's CNN from 1992 with the Gulf War and the CNN that we see the last few years are not the same. And it took a little while for people to come around to that. And over the let's call it a couple years before the pandemic, started getting a lot more people who started coming around and saying, "Hey, Matt, these things that I thought you were exaggerating, or I thought that you were putting too much focus on, wow, it turns out to be true." And the stories that are being peddled to us from these organizations and their cohorts in the media, wow, I now look at them with a lot more skepticism. So that all leads us up to the pandemic, where this all comes to a head. And during the very beginning of the pandemic, I went kind of semi-viral and got a lot of attention because I started trying to interpret and break down the news around COVID, because people are, if you could ignore the news before this, you couldn't ignore it anymore, right? The information that you were getting from a CNN or a New York Times or Washington Post or this or that, or from this national health advisor, your public health department of your county, the information you're getting from these sources is determinative of your life quality and your health and safety over the short term and possibly the long term. And so as I started interpreting a lot of that information and synthesizing it for people, I got a lot more, my engagement shot through the roof, and 7x'd my social media following. And then that my louder voice and my more consistent content started coming from there. And the one vessel of skepticism and interpretation that people needed from someone who's media literate like me, in this case, happens to be around health. And a lot of people who typically general interest people like myself were not really so focused on the mishaps of big pharma and the public health world before 2020. But now my general skepticism, institutional skepticism, and the skepticism from a lot of people who were naturopathic doctors or health professionals and fitness professionals, and also skeptical of a lot of the kind of common legacy stories going on in the health world. I coincided with them, and they we interacted a lot, and they became very supportive of what I was saying. And I said, oh, wow, these people who have been studying the pharmaceutical industry and studying the messages we're getting from public health sources for a while now, like, yeah, they now are kind of folded into a more broad-based skepticism that a lot of people have. And I gave a bit of a voice to that.
You're being humble, but yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it's great to get that kind of background in the, I'm a health and wellness guy. I'm a physician. I have to be honest, like my initial training was, more in this like sort of real Western model, right? I got my medical doctorate from UC San Diego, top 10 school in the country, and pharmaceuticals were, I can't even remember how many semesters of pharmacology we had. A lot, right? It was like, we got to name a disease and then which medication would we prescribe? Like, that's kind of how we were taught. And it makes sense now in the big picture, right? A lot of these pharmaceutical companies had lots of influence because they were supporting medical education. They were giving lots of dollars, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of like follow the money. I hate the simplicity of that, but it's kind of the way that the world works, whether we want to, really.
And I have some thoughts about that, but yeah, no, I see.
Yeah, but just generally speaking, I mean, I got to witness this firsthand. There were these, we called them, I don't know, drug rep dinners or whatever, right? Where you as a medical student got to go to this cool restaurant. They would talk about whatever their new drug was. And like, they were kind of trying to, of course, influence us, right? Indoctrinate, influence, whatever it was that they were doing. But that was kind of the beginning of all this stuff. And this was 25 years ago when I was in medical school, and I was recognizing that this didn't seem right to me. Like this, somehow these lines are really blurred, and like, I'm not sure this is the right way or the best way. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Yeah. In terms of it being driven by big business, and big business, essentially, as big business gets involved in profit motive, overtakes sensibility, and that's to varying degrees. You start to get a more limited perspective. You start to get kind of the company line, right? And pushed on things that have an incentive not to tell you the entire story. And as you mentioned, you don't want to be too simplistic about saying follow the money, because in an American capitalist society, there's going to be a profit motive involved in everything. So it's almost circular reasoning to say follow the money. By that definition, literally everything that did ever work, also you should be skeptical of because someone made money off it. I was like, well, no, like, you follow the money there, and it followed you to somebody who just had a good idea, commercialized it, and made money off it, right? Man, but the United States pharmaceutical industry, I mean, the way from a layman's perspective, it really started to not smell so right is about antidepressants to me. They really seem to be overprescribed, and it seems like we start to clinicalize normal, everyday negative emotions. And it's like, you might be unhappy. There's a normal course of human despair where you might not be feeling great all the time. You might have some anxiety. You might be anxious. You might be this, you might be that. And it started to seem, once again, from my 2 arms length distance, that the medical industry was being way too quick to prescribe antidepressants or painkillers or things of that nature. Or, I guess Ritalin isn't an antidepressant, but stuff having to do with,
mood altering, whatever, some kind of a mood altering, medication.
Exactly. And then you look at the pure numbers of the United States prescribing those drugs, any order of magnitude more than any other country on earth, and you start to want to say that it's right off the bat, there's reason to be skeptical. And then you start digging under, and it's like, okay, this is a follow the money thing where it's being driven by companies that have a new business line, and there's a problem to solve. And the more extensive the problem is, the more extensive the solution, which puts dollars in bank accounts, can be prescribed. And then it starts becoming almost a cycle. I see very much of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where if people are concerned, if people think that there's a problem that can be diagnosed, and then there's a solution for that problem that can be diagnosed, all of a sudden problems that might just be day-to-day things that might dissolve themselves or correct themselves normally, all of a sudden become diagnosed and thus need some sort of prescriptive solution. And then it's a vicious cycle. That's something I've noticed, that 5 years ago, when I had not done as much research about the pharma world, seemed to be true. And my further investigation has validated the concern.
This holiday season, I've been trying out many different kinds of healthy hot cocoa, because who doesn't like sitting by the fireplace, warming up those toes and sipping some nice hot cocoa? So why not get some of the best quality stuff? And so far, I've found an amazing 6-ingredient organic hot cocoa with 4-Sigmatic. That's F-O-U-R Sigmatic. And they even have a blend that I'm loving right now with the organic reishi mushrooms, because reishi has been shown to boost your immune health. It even has anti-cancer activity, and it can fight fatigue and depression. So why not get your pack of this amazing 4-Sigmatic healthy hot cocoa? Try the reishi and get it today. And you can even get 15% off with the code DRTH for Dr. Thomas Hemingway. That is DRTH. Enter that code at 4sigmatic.com. That's FOURSIGMATIC.com, and the code DRTH, because 4-Sigmatic offers many healthy functional blends of high quality coffee, creamers, and much more. Check it out, 4sigmatic.com with the code DRTH, and I think you'll love it like I do. Aloha.
Yeah, no, you mentioned something that I'm grateful. Finally, we have even more data. There's been data, but I think sort of one of the most powerful papers that came out was just this past summer, right, from the University College of London, that basically said pretty definitively, after looking at tomes of data, like they did, what you and I are familiar with, the meta-analysis, where they review a bunch of studies and they put all that into one sort of summary, right, is that the serotonin model of depression, guess what? Doesn't really hold water.
Yeah.
What? That's what I was taught in medical school. I mean, that's literally what I was taught in a mechanistic way. And if you have low levels, you need serotonin. But actually they've looked at all these folks with depression, and guess what? Their levels were all across the freaking map, all across the map. And finally we have this that says, look, this model that we regarded as whatever you want to call it, scripture, gospel, truth, it's kind of fallen apart.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
And to me, it all seemed, the notion of a chemical imbalance, much like the follow the money thing in a lot of cases, seems circular. Well, okay, your body's made of chemicals, right? If the chemical composition is leading to severe discomfort, isn't that by nature something that's an imbalance of some sort? And thus, like, the idea that it can simply be solved by changing the chemical composition, well, okay, it would just be that easy to solve that like that, right? But figure out what the chemical levels are, what they need to be, and you'd go figure it out. But that seemed a little too simplistic, right? I mean, was that how you thought about it even before this literature came out that seemed to more directly disprove it based on specifically the serotonin aspect?
Yeah, that, and just among the fact that you hit it right off the bat, that we disproportionately in this country are supplying the world and taking these medications, whether it be the SSRIs or there's several varieties, but the amount that is being prescribed is off the charts compared to the rest of the world, even the rest of the developed world. And when I look at that kind of from a keen, viewpoint, like you're sitting in going, wait, this doesn't seem right. Are we that much different than the folks who are living in the UK or in France or in Italy or whatever? Are we that much different that we require these, tons and tons of antidepressants? Now, I'm a physician. This is not medical advice, but there are people who certainly need them. Absolutely. We're not telling you to go off your medication here. What we're telling you is to have a discussion and look into options. And if there is a way to come off and you can do so safely with your doctor under their recommendation, that's great. Okay. But what we're sort of observing from a distance, the 35,000-foot view, is that there's just way too many of these prescribed in the US for sure. Hands down, without a question, the data supports that. And it's not a one size fits all, and it's definitely problematic.
It just seemed to me, I mean, as the layperson, that the pills could make sense if a person is legitimately non-functional otherwise. If it's that debilitating, but instead of it only being prescribed when the RPMs really got into the red, where a person is literally not functioning, they're so depressed, it started to become a casual prescription for anyone who is simply not doing that, not feeling their happiest, right? And like to look at the numbers of how extensively they were prescribed, to imagine that this many people are so depressed they're generally non-functional did not make sense.
Yeah. And clinically, I can tell you there's a lot of reasons that this happened. It was kind of the perfect storm in a lot of ways, right? I think, unfortunately, culturally, for whatever reason, we're kind of used to asking for this or that for this ailment, right? Like now we're exposed. If you flip on the TV, there's so many commercials from pharmaceutical companies. And so we sort of have that in our heads already. Doctors are, constrained on time. They got 5 to 10 minutes with you. It's like, okay, easy solution. I'll just write the prescription, boom, boom, boom. And so I think some of it is that, some of it is the lack of understanding. Some of it is just the utility and ease, just the ease of it, right? It's so much easier for a doctor to write a prescription and to be done in 5 minutes than to have that 1 hour plus conversation with you to try to really get to the bottom of what's at the root of whatever the illness is. I mean, we're talking about antidepressants. We could do the same discussion about, let's just call it what it is, the statins, right? The statin drugs have their place, but they're way overutilized. I mean, look at our numbers in the US compared to other countries. We utilize so many more statin prescriptions than anywhere else in the world. And I think it's kind of similar to this scenario that we're talking about right here and there. Yes, there is a reason for it. Yes, there are people who can benefit. But, I've heard some cardiologists say we should put statins in the water. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. It's just absurd.
What are your thoughts on the thesis that it's because we are such a demanding culture that we demand a solution to everything, and that a professional, someone who's regarded highly, is supposed to have the answers, doesn't want to be the person who says the answer is is to let time take its course and nature take its course, and it might be rough for the next 2-3 months, but you're going to gradually snap out of it without this stuff. Here are a half dozen daily natural activities and exercises for you to engage in. They're not going to work magic right off the bat, but just let time take its course over the next few months. And it's like that advice seems to not be, nobody wants to be the professional given that advice, but it might be the right advice.
Yeah, no, certainly it could easily be the right advice and could be the most helpful. And I think there's a lot of reasons for why not only maybe myself and I'll just use that loosely, as physicians out there may not want to give that advice for the time constraint. For nowadays, there's this whole thing about the customer service satisfaction score, like you get a score, right, with your patients. And if you do, basically in our minds, if we do what they want us to do, we get a better score. And they've attached, I don't know if you know this, Matt, I'm sure you do, but they attach money to this. Like doctors who get better scores get paid more money. So if doctors prescribe what the patients ask them for, whether it be Ritalin or narcotics or whatever it is, they get more money. Like that doesn't even, that is
the most perverse of incentives. And I mean, I'd also be interested in your perspective on this. My father is a doctor. He was a doctor back in the 70s and 80s, and then took, 20 years away to pursue other ventures and then returned to it a few years back. In the 70s and 80s, he had his own practice. It seemed like every other doctor that he knew had their own practice. Some would be affiliated with hospitals. Now he circles back 20 years later. He works for a big major medical corporation that just sends doctors around all over the place. Was there consolidation where being a doctor seemed to have had to go from primarily independent small business practitioners to another employee for a large corporation.
Yeah, no, there's definitely more of that. And that, I think I'm with you. I feel like that makes the problem worse because you sort of have to toe the line for whatever, bigger corporation you work for, whether it be Kaiser, whether, in California, Kaiser is big. In Hawaii, there's an organization that's pretty big there. And you have to sort of toe the line to stay in these organizations, and not all of the things that you're asked to do are really the best, both for the patient. At the end of the day, what I care about is you, Matt, or the patient in front of me. If I'm not helping that person, I'm on the right path as a physician. If I'm not really helping you to get healthy and to stay healthy, I'm doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. And right now in the Western, I'll say at least for the chronic disease, which is about 90% of what we have in America is chronic disease. About 10% of it is the acute illness, right? You get in a car accident or you fall down, you dislocate your shoulder, all this stuff. We are amazing in this country in our emergency care. I'll be the first. I've been in that environment for 20 years. We are great. But what we really suck at is all the other stuff, which is the chronic conditions, the diabetes, the obesity, the high blood pressure, the heart disease, which is still the number one killer. And we have amazing acute care treatments, but guess what? They keep coming back. You got to get another stent, a second, a third, a fourth stent, because we're not doing stuff right at the root cause level, right? The simple stuff, the dietary stuff, the exercise, the movement, the stress, the sleep, all these kind of intangible things that are so simple, so easy, and that are free for the most part, we suck at, but they cause 90% of the medical issues in this country. We're missing the mark. Yeah.
It certainly seems to be the case. And where do you see that some of the institutions and the scaled organizations are misleading people?
Well, I think it's difficult because those organizations have to be sort of directed by other bigger organizations. Let's just say the government, for example, right? Like we have sort of the powers that be are sending information our way and saying, okay, the biggest, and I don't know if most people know this, but the biggest payer in the US for healthcare is Medicare. Mm-hmm. Medicare is part of the government. So if you are trying to survive as an independent individual practitioner, you have to go by the laws of Medicare, generally speaking. If you're a big organization, your number one sort of client, if you will, is Medicare. And so you have to sort of follow their rules to be able to even get paid. Because what happens is Medicare is the beginning of it, but all of the other insurers sort of follow suit. They kind of fall in line. And so unfortunately, that system, Medicare, and I don't think anybody in their right minds would tell you Medicare is working well. Medicare is broken. It is not working well. Yes, it will bankrupt our country. We're not putting money in the right places. We're missing the mark for so many reasons, but that's kind of where it starts. And it's a struggle out there, I'll tell you.
Yeah. It seems every time you look at it, I'm sure you know the details of this better than I do, but we spend the most to get the least.
Yeah.
For what we spend, it's an abomination how little we get, and nobody seems to be able to fix this system. And it's really structural in nature what the problems are.
We are right now, Matt, one of the most unhealthy, if not the most healthy countries on the planet. We spend, like you said, we spend more money on healthcare per capita than any other country in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's not working for us, right? The diabetes rates are rising. Obesity rates are rising. Did you know that today, 74% of Americans are overweight? 74%. When you and I were born, it was like maybe 20%. It's 74% right now. It's ridiculous. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's insanity. Yeah. It's insanity. I mean, it's crazy stuff.
Well, that seems to be the thing with COVID. Everyone was looking at the results, the American results, and why are you guys so high up there with COVID deaths? And people are blaming it on preventative measures and this and that, and you guys are divided. Culture of independence. I was like, well, no, there's just more unhealthy people here. That this was a metabolic disease that took out people with unhealthy metabolic structure and systems, and that's a problem.
Yeah, 88% of us is kind of the new norm that we recognize are not metabolically healthy. That's nearly 9 out of 10 of us. The cool thing, and I want people to know this, is that actually you can reverse your metabolic health rather quickly. And I think that's the biggest problem. Or for me, it's embarrassing that for 2+ years of the pandemic, we have not focused nearly for a hot second on how we could get metabolically healthy. And we could literally do that within a couple of weeks. And it starts simply with what lies at the tip of our fork or in the cart at the grocery store, or with the other choices we make, right? Whether we choose to move our body or not, or get good sleep or not, or optimize our stress or not, mindset or not. Like, it's the simple things, but we're just not doing it.
Yeah.
And this pandemic, I think, was a real, for me, it was in medicine and all of that. It was like, oh my gosh, like, you nailed it. Like, we're the most metabolically unhealthy that we have ever been in the history of time. Mm-hmm. How does this happen? Crazy. But it can actually be reversed pretty simply. And I wish more people were talking about that. That's why I'm here.
2-week plan? What's the 2-week plan to reverse your within 2 weeks, at least reverse the course of your metabolic health?
Yeah. So the first part of it is the simple food as medicine, right? Food could be your best medicine ever, or it could be the worst poison. You get to decide that each and every day. So number one, simple, just eat real food. Don't eat the crap in the center of the grocery store that has the highly processed sugars, the highly processed glutens and grains, and the seed oils. Like, avoid those. I call those the evil triad. You avoid those 3 things and you're going to be so much better off. So eat real food. Second is just move your body each and every day. Just go for a simple walk. And if you can't find the time to do 30 minutes, every time you eat a meal, walk for 10 minutes. Walk for 10 minutes right after you eat the meal. Your blood sugar will not spike as much. Your insulin correspondingly will also not spike that much. Do that every day for 5 to 30 minutes, whatever you can fit in. You don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to buy a membership, none of that stuff. Just walk. Simple, simple, simple. The next thing is just sleep 7 hours or so, 7 to 8 hours. And there's lots of, we could go for an hour about all this sort of tricks of the trade, how you get that perfect sleep score. And I don't use one of those devices. I don't use an Oura Ring. We know, Matt, I bet if I asked you, did you get a good night's sleep last night? You could tell me if you did or you didn't, whether or not you wore the Oura Ring. Am I right?
Yeah. And
you don't need a number.
What's up?
You don't need a number to tell you if you slept well. Like, if you slept well and you feel refreshed and rejuvenated, like, that stuff. You don't have to buy the Oura Ring.
And contrast it against when you don't. It's a very easy contrast. It's weird. It's like that brain fog almost. It's like your head and your brain just feel differently when you're well rested.
Yeah.
No contest.
So besides those simple things, there's also, as important, and you probably know this, is that the things you actually eat, right? Food is information. You eat the real stuff, the real food, but also the timing that you eat that food. And you can just backpedal 100 years. We didn't eat for 16 to 18 hours a day, which is what we do in the US right now. If you study this, you'll see that we eat on average over 16 hours out of the day. Like, we are eating some up to 18 hours out of the day. Yeah. We're snacking. We're having the bedtime snack. We're having the first thing we get up in the morning, go to the coffee house, and not only we get our latte, which is full of sugar and everything else, but we're getting our scone, or we're getting our, croissant or whatever it is. Like, we're eating all freaking day long.
Yeah.
And our ancestry never did that. We got to give our bodies a break, right?
It seems like people have, if you are looking at things that people decided to give a name to, that it actually was good, intermittent fasting, whatever, even if the name is a little bit of an eye roller, the idea that, okay, wait, it's natural to have a longer period during which you don't eat, that does seem to be one of the positive developments in American health and diet recently, that more people gravitating towards that.
Do you like hackers? I certainly don't. I hate them. I just can't stand even the thought of being hacked at the airport or any other place where you use public Wi-Fi. And so I have joined ExpressVPN, and you should too. And if you use my code at expressvpn.com/Dr. Thomas, that's DrThomas, you will get 3 months for free. So why stress about the hackers? Why stress about using airport Wi-Fi? I don't any longer. In fact, I use airport Wi-Fi all the time because I'm protected at ExpressVPN. So check it out, expressvpn.com/Dr. Thomas for 3 months free.
Yeah, and it's free, it's simple, it's easy. We've been doing it for millennia. You and I probably did it as kids. I know I did. Like, we ate dinner at like 5 o'clock. And then we didn't eat after that. Like, we couldn't, my mother literally put a lock, and I'm not lying here. We had a lock on our fridge. After dinner, the thing was locked. We couldn't eat. And then we didn't eat till 7 the next morning. That's a 14-hour overnight fast. And we didn't even have a word for that. We didn't call it intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding. Like that was real life.
That was,
and guess what? Nobody was overweight hardly back in those days, right?
Your family took the right approach, and I had, I was not, necessarily fat, but I was never in good shape as a kid. And, I have a Jewish family, and they really push the food hard. And just the craziness of what they considered to be the right breakfast diet of cereal, like a sugary cereal, toast with butter and an orange juice. Right off there, like even just solving for that, I could not even fathom how much of a healthier child I would have been. And throughout my entire childhood. And then the notion of nothing, like no snack, not even something that, like, they said pretzels. They'd say like pretzels are a safe thing to have after dinner. It's like, oh, just don't eat ice cream. You have a pretzel or a piece of bread. Oh my God. Like just literally had changing those two items. It's such a game changer. But the health authorities at that point, go ahead, eat more grains. Yeah, a glass of orange juice in the morning. I was like, no, this thing is packed with sugar.
Oh my gosh, we could do this forever, man, right? We don't drink our fruit, we eat our fruit. If you just eat it and then you chew it and you enjoy it, not only has the fiber and all that, but you're not getting that massive spike in your blood sugar. Now, we were taught all the wrong stuff. It came from the authority, right? The FDA and the nutrition pyramid. You know what's really sad, Matt, is that stuff has not significantly changed. The latest guidelines that are supposed to take us through to 2025 are nearly identical of the last iteration, which is horrible, right? The carbs, for real. The newest iteration.
That is scary.
It's insanity. And it's the reason that, I'm doing this. I wrote the book called Preventable, which is coming out hopefully in November, because all of these things that we suffer from, 90% of it is preventable. It's not in the genes, guys. It's in what we do, right? What we eat or we don't eat, the timing of it, the activities we do or we don't do. Like, we can solve this problem rather easily. And Matt was asking simply, we can do it in a couple of weeks. Like, we don't have to stay here. I would love it. I know you're pressed on time. We'll have to do this again and talk about Alzheimer's research and all this other stuff that's just been eye-opening for many of us. I hope all of us that we hear these things. We're like, oh my gosh, is this, dude, as you know, it's the facts are stranger than fiction thing. Like, holy crap. So that's why I appreciate you. You're crushing it with that. You're helping us. Tell us any parting thoughts and then how people can reach out to you, grab your podcast, subscribe, all the cool stuff you're doing.
For sure. Yes. So my podcast is called The Prevailing Narrative, available on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, et cetera. Twitter and Instagram are where I'm most vocal. Both of those are Matt Bilinsky, MattBilinsky. And parting thoughts are just, I imagine this is what you found attractive about my content, is just focus on the process of critical analysis and diving in, reading the study, not just the headline. You see something that either one, totally validates what you thought, or two, totally contradicts what you thought. Maybe consider the counterexamples. Always be considering the counterexamples. It's like, wait a second, what is something that might prove this to be not true? And I think that I gather that that's why some people appreciate because some people who are just trying to be contrarians are just trying to be disagreeable. But then if you're just running a process to see, okay, this is the story I'm being told, is there a control group, or is there an example that is not just an outlier that might contradict this? And if you can hone down on being good about counterexamples without following outliers, like rarity outliers over the edge, that's how you become an informed person and an informed observer. And so I hope those principles of, those empirical principles are helpful to people. And
they are. And I thank you for the work you're doing. You're crushing it. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we got to have this chat again as well, man. It was an honor. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, Doc. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any future episode. And I'd love to hear your comments and feedback. If there's any topic you'd love to hear about, you're dying to know, burning questions, please comment below and let me know what future topics are of interest to you.
Disclaimer: nothing in this video is medical advice. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.